I'm Dave Taylor, I work at SOMO, and I'm currently a technical architect for them, and I still have my old job as well as lead Android guy, at least from the line management perspective. So I still dabble in that side of things, certainly in Kotlin. And this talk kind of is my new flavour of the month, I guess, because Kotlin was the last one. It's Flutter. And I was kind of aware of Flutter at Google I/O, where they kind of gave a bit of a coming out party this year. And it kind of blew my mind at the time. So just wanted to share a few thoughts on that kind of stuff. So yeah, so what is Flutter? It's oh yeah, I've got stupid animations again. So Flutter's a cross-platform, although they don't seem to emphasise that. It's a mobile SDK that happens to work on both Android and iOS. It's developed by Google. They use it internally quite a lot. It's been around for quite a while actually, but as I said, it kind of made almost a coming out party at I/O this year. It uses Dart under the hood, which is a Google language, but it's since been certified by a wider community, which is open source, strongly typed, all that kind of good stuff. It's quite a modern language. It doesn't quite have the nice semantics of Kotlin, unfortunately, but it's up there. It's very Java-like. Yeah, and apparently Dart runs about 50% of Google's code, so like their AdSense applications run in Dart and all that kind of jazz. So it's efficient and does a lot of heavy lifting. So Flutter was also used in Fuchsia, Google's crazy let's remake OSs from scratch. So forget Unix and Linux BSD type operating systems. What would a modern operating system look like today if we were to build one? And that's Google's Fuchsia project. Again, it's an open source thing, but to make apps, and I don't even think they call them apps. They use Flutter to power that. And it's in alpha still, so that's an important point to bear in mind in this. I was told they're looking to go beta mid next year, hopefully coincide with I/O, but that's kind of a wait and see. But Google are promoting it quite heavily at the moment. So what is it? How does it compare? What makes it different? So it does compile down to native code, and when I say native, I mean machine code, targeting ARM or whatever process you're going for. It doesn't use native views though, which is quite interesting. So it doesn't, if you say you want to, an edit text or text view type thing, then it doesn't actually use the system version of that. It builds its own. It writes directly to the screen. And there's pros and cons with that, which I'll talk about. Dart is a strongly typed system, so that's pretty good versus things like React Native. And it is a reactive system, so it only changes things that need to be changed based on user interactions and all that. And lots of individual widgets on screen can hold their own little bits of state. So it's all very kind of modular and reactive in that sense. And they make no bones about it that it is heavily inspired by React Native. And yeah, from what I've seen of React Native as well, tried to do direct comparisons. They do have very similar concepts in terms of like widgets and components. They're very similar things, and just like in React Native, where you can either have classes which hold state or kind of constants which don't. You have a very similar thing, stateful and stateless widgets in Flutter. They provide many components themselves in the SDK, so you have, like say, text views and edit texts and navigation bars and navigation elements, switches and toggles and all the usual stuff you're used to seeing on both iOS and Android. And from that perspective, I'm kind of surprised when I was looking at React Native that a lot of those things are missing. So if you want a toolbar, React Native don't really supply their own. You have to go out to the community or build your own. It's not a massive thing, but you get a bit surprised by these things. Same with navigation, routing between screens and things. You think, surely that's a core element, but React Native don't offer that. You have to go out to the community and choose the most starred project on GitHub kind of thing, which is a bit weird. So whereas all that is provided on Flutter, which is really nice. And they also provide excellent tooling. So because it's a strongly typed language, you have all the benefits that you would coding in Java or Swift, for example. So Google provide plugins for both IntelliJ and Android Studio 3.0 now. So you get all those benefits, code completion and bouncing around the code with control click and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really nice, and it really helps you a lot. That was another thing with React Native I really struggled with, setting up my tooling system to actually work properly. So I want to actually use a visual representation of how these things look, and this is on Google's own slides. If you try and find the various Flutter presentations. So everything on green here represents your application, what you code and what happens in your APK or IPA. And everything in blue is what the system is doing. So this is what you'd expect a native app written in Java, Kotlin or Objective-C, Swift kind of thing, the usual way an iOS or Android developer would code an app. So, yep. So on the platform side, you have your widgets, and they directly write to the canvas and stuff. But you also have access to various other kind of location and sensors and camera and all that kind of good jazz. The old way to build a wrapped web app, effectively, so I'm thinking Cordova kind of style, all your app would be in JavaScript, and that would just run in a web view, which is a system component. And you have this bridge which allows a limited number of interactions with the platform underlying services. React Native does things slightly differently. So on the left you have your JavaScript, and they have this bridge which then jumps to actual platform widgets. But otherwise you've got similar kind of things with the services, but they provide nice APIs for actually linking out to custom native code. And so this bridge is quite slow, but what they do, which is quite fast, is to provide this virtual DOM tree, or a representation of how your apps are rendered. And they know when something in that tree is changed, and only when that change is made they can update the platform side of things. So they're holding state and that whole view, and they only change what they need to. So that provides a bit of a speed boost over the old way of doing web apps. But Flutter's a bit different. Like I was saying, it renders its own widgets, so it totally ignores the platform widgets. So it writes directly to the canvas and subscribes to platform events. And in a similar way, you can write your own plugins in native code, and there's a really nice way of handling that, actually. The best kind of I've seen. And in a similar way, in kind of an analogous way to React Native, instead of having this virtual DOM, you have the DOM in your app, and it knows when something changes in that, it just re-renders to the canvas. And it's got some really clever and really highly optimized things to do that. So it uses rendering engines from Chrome, for example, to do text things. So it's leaning heavily on Google's kind of engineering history to provide these things in an optimal way. So the structural repainting is when it knows that a component needs changing. It doesn't need to, again, do the whole screen. It just changes the pixels that it knows it needs to change on the screen. And this bit splitting references, when there's a scrolling event or animation, it just knows that it can use this bit splitting thing, which is a GPU optimized scheme for just moving bits around the screen. So it's really highly optimum. And it means that you basically get 60 frames per second unless you're, on everything, unless you're being really stupid about how you're coding things. So they provide a set of kind of out-of-the-box components. So on the left you've got these Cupertino navigation bar and Cupertino switch bars. So that's what they kind of prepend their iOS style widgets with Cupertino. And on the right it kind of shows just how custom you can go, because you can either, because these things are open source, you can either extend or edit what's already available, or you can just write directly to the canvas your own things. So it's a really nice kind of system. And as I said, tooling. So if you add the Flutter plugin to Android Studio, you can now have direct access to start a Flutter project, and that's all nicely controlled in Android Studio. And it means you only have Android Studio and Xcode to play with, rather than on the left if you use IntelliJ, Android Studio, and Xcode. It's all really, really nice. So now the scary bit. So I've got IntelliJ open. Where's my mouse? And I've got an iPhone Kiss on the left. And this is running in slow mode, so you can see a banner top right of the simulator. It says slow mode, and that means that it has all these kind of instrumentation built into the IPA in this case, so that we can do some quick debugging and also hot reloading and things like that. And on the right I've got IntelliJ. So this is what this app looks like. I don't know if everyone can read this, but this is the main kind of entry point to the app. You have basically build me a material app. This is kind of my theme, and the entry point is this home page, which is a widget, and everything's a widget. So even padding is a widget that you wrap around another widget, and all this kind of jazz. Routing's really nice, so you can just associate a string with another widget or widget builder system, and you basically tell it where home is. So it's almost like a web URI type thing. And this is the routing. So because this is a contacts style app, I've basically got two screens. So it's detail, master detail. So if I click one of these, I'm not a designer, I have to say that. But so I've got this thing going on. So this looks at the root and actually pulls out the ID of that person and chucks that to the system, which is quite nice. So the home page, it's a stateful widget, you'll notice, and this kind of shows my state, which is like just get people. This get counter thing, that's from the original temporary novel. And then you'll see, so this is the main app. So you have this thing called a scaffold. You have an app bar where it tells you that top bar. You can add a text within that. So you have these widgets and then children of widgets. And you kind of say the body is this list view. So you use these people, and that's it. That's your list view. You just kind of set your background, and that uses these contact rows, which is another widget, but it's stateless because it doesn't care what's going on. It just knows, give me a person object, and I'll render that person object. And if you click me, I can create an on-tap event, and you can deal with that. So again, you can see there's this material object, a container, which is the super of that, and you have various children. You have rows and columns, padding, all that kind of stuff. So it's quite easy to read. It gets a bit nested unless you like pull things out into, you get these massive triangles. Unless you pull out your own widgets and properly componentize everything. But it's really nice. And then this is my, here's an on-tap event. When it's clicked, go to this on-clicked event, which is down here, and then navigate to this. It's all very simple. And there's a hot reload button up here, which builds things again. So, for example, I can say, I don't want that blue, I want that yellow, then hot reload it, and it should turn it red, yellow straight away. And it remembers where you are, so again, I could say, I want that actually green. And you can define these, whoops, I pressed the wrong button. So that was a full build, and it's still pretty quick. So you kind of get an idea of how it is. And you get nice animations and gestures. So this animation here is a hero animation. So you have a hero widget, and you just give it a tag, and you give the other thing a tag, much like shared element transitions from Android, but even easier to implement. You just wrap something with this hero widget and give it a tag. Job done. So yeah, I'm really quite happy with it and playing around with it a lot at the moment. So if I go back to my code, this isn't code. So yeah, what are the benefits? I think it's a really well thought out system. Google said when they gave it to an engineering team to redo an Android app, so they had an internal Android app and they wanted an iOS app, and the Flutter team jumped on them and said, why don't you build a Flutter app and then you can do it on both. They rebuilt the Android app in 2/3 of the time that it took them initially, and they had an iOS app out of it as well. So I can see how that works. Some of the things are really well thought out in terms of navigation, handling backstack and things like that in terms of Android. State, you can rotate these things, it'll remember its state, you don't need to worry about all that kind of thing. Really good tooling. The Flutter team are amazing and really ready to help. If you've got any questions, they're really active on Twitter and other forums. Yeah, 60 frames per second without fail, asterisk. And yeah, they provide loads of components and all these things. They've got built-in lovely gesture handling and things, again, easier to do than Android, because I think they learned a lot of lessons from that team. And the animation things are really easy as well. One thing I quite like is that because everything's rendered directly, you can get away from all these visual bugs that you might see on a platform-specific version, like Android 4.4 for example, or certain Samsung devices, because it doesn't care what platform it's running on. It just builds exactly the same pixels it would have done on a different phone. So that's really nice. And I think it needs Android 4.4 or iOS 8. I think they're the minimum requirements, if I remember rightly. So it's quite a big range there. But in terms of limitations, that was me earlier trying to get pizza. It is in alpha, and that's quite difficult to kind of convince people to invest time in building something for them. So as an agency, we've been initially starting a few kind of tentative talks with some clients, and it's kind of hard to convince them it's the way to go, even though a lot of them have already seen React Native and they understand the benefits of that kind of approach. At the moment, there are more Android components than iOS, and the apps tend to feel a bit material-like, but there's more to come, and certainly by the time it's in beta, I'm sure there'll be loads of iOS-specific things. And if you want to build your own things, it's all open source. There's a big community, so those things are coming and being, integrated through pull requests and things. So it's good to see that kind of thing. And the wider state management side isn't fully standardized in the platform. When talking to the guys, they kind of saying that it's kind of half on purpose, almost like the way they did it with Android, and they don't want to prescribe an architecture for the developers. But because it's so close to React Native, there's quite a few people that think that Redux type approach of handling like wider state is kind of a good thing there. But you can use RX Dart or whatever. You can use your own implementation for those kind of things. So yeah. So next thing, can I use it now? Absolutely. Google are using it heavily internally. There's various apps in production right now, and one of them, which was their biggest thing that they've been touting recently, is the Hamilton app. So for the stage show Hamilton, which is crazy popular, they created an app for basically having a lottery where you can enter for tickets, and you have so many entries a day or something, and it's seen massive engagement. So it was featured on both the App Store and the Play Store. So if you're worried that Apple won't like it or won't see it as a first-class citizen on the store, then you're wrong, because they actively support these things. All the ratings are high 4-point somethings, and it sees 1 million plus monthly active users and 100k daily active users, etc. And it isn't exactly the same on both platforms, so it does have kind of platform-specific kind of feel and native kind of touch. And yeah, as I say, Google are pushing it. So that's what the Hamilton app looks like on iOS, I guess. So yeah, that's me. Just to say, that's my contact details, and if anyone is looking for iOS jobs, we've got a lead and senior role going. We've also got senior and junior QA roles, and much more in London, including Scrum Masters and product owners and things like that. So